The cold in Wyoming isn't just weather. It's a verdict. I know this because the night I turned 15, I felt it freeze the breath in my lungs. I stood in the parking lot of a desolate rest stop, watching the red taillights of my father's truck dissolve into a whiteout blizzard. He'd told me to get out and check the rear tire. My brother Joshua was laughing in the passenger seat. I heard the engine rev, then the crunch of tires on ice. He didn't just drive away, he erased me. I didn't run after them. I just looked down at my feet. Lying in the gray slush was a half-eaten bologna sandwich he'd thrown out the window moments before. That sandwich was the last thing he ever gave me. Before I tell you how I survived the cold, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community tonight. 15 years later, the only cold I feel is the calibrated chill of the walk-in freezer at Foundry, my restaurant in Chicago. I'm not just a cook anymore. I'm the executive chef and owner of a place where the waiting list is 3 months long, and the tasting menu costs more than my father's monthly mortgage payment used to be. The kitchen is my domain now. It's a machine of perfect efficiency, loud and hot and alive. And I control every single moving part. I was at the pass, checking the garnish on the scallop course, when I saw them on the security feed. 3 figures standing at the host stand, looking out of place in their off-the-rack coats and worn-out shoes. My father, Christopher, looking smaller and grayer than the monster in my memory. My mother, Sarah, clutching her purse like a shield. And Joshua, the golden child, looking around with a sneer that tried to mask his insecurity. They looked disheveled, desperate. They didn't have a reservation. They didn't know the owner. They were just hoping to exploit a family connection they had severed a decade and a half ago. I didn't panic. I didn't hide in the office. I felt a calm settle over me, precise and sharp as a boning knife. I pressed the button on my headset. David, I said to my maitre d', my voice steady. Seat the party of 3 at the chef's table. David hesitated. Chef? That table is reserved for VIPs. I know, I said. Seat them, and make sure the glass partition is closed. I want them isolated. I watched on the monitor as David led them through the dining room. The chef's table is a glass-enclosed private room right inside the kitchen. It's usually for food critics and celebrities, a place of honor. But tonight, it was a fishbowl. It was a cage. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see the power I held, the empire I had built on the ashes of the girl they left in the snow. My father used to tell me that women belonged in the kitchen at home, silent, serving others. Well, he was right about one thing. I was in the kitchen, but I wasn't serving. I was holding court, and they were about to find out that the menu tonight was entirely up to me. I signaled my sous chef to take over the pass. This wasn't a dish I could delegate. I needed to prepare their first course myself. I pulled a loaf of house-made brioche from the rack and began to slice it, the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the knife echoing the heartbeat I was forcing to slow down. I wasn't going to give them truffles or caviar. I was going to give them a memory. I grabbed a package of cheap, plasticky bologna I'd sent a runner to buy from the corner store an hour ago. I began to construct a sandwich. Deconstructed, elevated, but unmistakable. As I spread the yellow mustard, the sharp, vinegary smell hit me. And suddenly, I wasn't in my stainless steel kitchen. I was back in the dust of the hardware store. I was 12 years old, sweeping metal shavings off the concrete floor while my father sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. Joshua was playing video games in the office, the electronic beeps taunting me. I had been working since 6 in the morning. Faster, Eleanor, my father would bark, never lowering the paper. You're moving like you're on vacation. You want to eat tonight. You earn it. I worked for free. I was the inventory clerk, the janitor, the punching bag. I learned early on that silence was the only defense I could afford. If I spoke, I was mouthy. If I cried, I was weak. If I asked for anything, I was a burden. That night in Wyoming wasn't an accident. It wasn't a sudden snap of judgment. It was the finale of a long, slow erasure. For years, I had been conditioned to believe that my survival depended on my invisibility. That's the invisible chain of the survivor. You don't run because you think you deserve the cage. You think the cold is your fault. When they drove away that night, part of me stood there waiting for them to come back. Not because I trusted them, but because I couldn't imagine existing without their permission. I thought I was nothing without them to tell me what I was worth. It took me 3 hours to start walking that night. 3 hours of shivering in the whiteout, convincing myself they were just testing me, that if I was just good enough or quiet enough, they would return. But the frostbite started to set in, and the survival instinct, the one they tried to beat out of me, finally kicked in. The chain snapped. I walked 5 miles to a truck stop. I didn't call the police. I didn't call a relative. I knew, with a terrifying clarity, that if I went back, I would die. Not physically, maybe, but the little spark of me that was left would be extinguished forever. So I became a ghost. I washed dishes for cash under the table at a roadside diner. I slept in dry storage pantries, curling up on sacks of flour because they held the heat better than the floor. I burned my arms on oven racks and cut my fingers on dull knives. And I didn't make a sound. I learned that pain was just information. I learned that hunger could be managed like inventory. I stopped using my last name. I became just Elle. Then Chef. I erased Eleanor. I didn't block them out of hatred. Hatred is hot. It requires energy I couldn't spare. I blocked them out of necessity. It was like gangrene. You don't hate the limb that's rotting. You just cut it off to save the body. I looked down at the plate. The bologna sandwich sat in the center, stark and ugly beautiful against the porcelain. I wiped the rim of the plate. Perfect. I walked into the glass room. They looked up. My mother's eyes filled with tears the instant. Weaponized tears I remembered so well. Joshua looked at his phone. Bored. Scrolling as if he were anywhere else. Christopher looked. Hungry. Not for food, but for ownership. He looked at the restaurant like he was appraising an asset he intended to liquidate. I placed the plate in the center of the table. Amuse-bouche, I said, my voice flat. Bologna and yellow mustard. Just like you used to make, Dad. The silence in the glass room was heavy. Pressurized. Like the airlock of a submarine before it crushes you. My father stared at the sandwich, his face twisting in genuine confusion. He didn't recognize the irony. He didn't see the symbol of his own cruelty. He just saw a cheap lunch on expensive china and assumed it was some avant-garde culinary statement he was too important to understand. Eleanor. My mother breathed, reaching out as if to touch my arm across the table. Her hand hovered. Trembling with a performance anxiety I recognized instantly. Oh. Look at you. You look healthy. She said it like an accusation. Like my survival was a clerical error she hadn't authorized. I stepped back, staying just out of reach. Sarah, I acknowledged. I didn't call her Mom. That title is earned. And she had tendered her resignation 15 years ago in a snowstorm. Joshua finally looked up from his phone. He scanned the room, taking in the busy kitchen outside the glass. The staff moving with military precision. The copper pots gleaming under the heat lamps. Nice place, he sneered, leaning back and crossing his arms. Little pretentious. Don't you think? All this fuss for food? It pays the bills, I said, my voice neutral, which is more than I can say for the hardware store. I assume. That's why you're here, isn't it? Christopher straightened up, puffing out his chest, trying to summon the authority he used to wield over me when I was a frightened teenager sweeping his floors. But he was in my world now. His authority was a currency that wasn't accepted here. He cleared his throat, adjusting a tie that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration. Don't be like that, Allie, he said, using a nickname I hated. We're family. We heard you were doing well. We were proud. We thought it was time to reconnect. Reconnect, I repeated. The word tasted sour, like spoiled milk. Is that what you call it? You left a 15-year-old girl in a blizzard with no coat and no money. You didn't disconnect. You abandoned. You disposed. He laughed. A short, dismissive bark of a laugh that made my sous chef outside the glass pause and look up. Oh, come on. You were a difficult kid. You needed to learn a lesson. You needed to toughen up. And look, he gestured around the room with a sweeping hand. It worked. We made you tough. You should be thanking us. If we hadn't given you that push, you'd probably still be sweeping floors in my store or working a register at a gas station. The gaslighting was breathtaking. It was architectural in its construction. He was rewriting history in real time, turning his sadism into a favor. He honestly believed he was the architect of my success, that my empire was built on his foundation of neglect. We need help, Eleanor, my mother interjected, her voice trembling, trying to soften the edge of his arrogance. The store, the economy, Your father's health. We have medical bills. Joshua's business. It had some bad luck. Bad luck, I said, looking at my brother. Joshua has never had bad luck. He's had a safety net. Me. And when I was gone, he had you. Did the net finally break? Joshua glared at me, his face reddening. You think you're better than us just because you can cook? I think I'm solvent, I said. And you're not. We need $450,000. Christopher said. He didn't ask. He didn't plead. He stated it. Like he was ordering a side of fries. To clear the debts. He continued, ticking points off on his fingers. To start fresh. To get Joshua set up in something new. It's not a loan. Ellie. Consider it. Reimbursement. Reimbursement, I said. For what? For raising you, he said, holding my gaze without a flicker of shame. For the food you ate for 15 years. For the roof over your head. The clothes on your back. We invested in you. We put resources into you. Now you're successful. It's time for a return on that investment. The toxicity filled the small room like carbon monoxide, odorless. Invisible. And deadly. They weren't here for a daughter. They were here for a payout. They saw me as a piggy bank they had misplaced in 2009 and finally found again under the couch cushions. They had itemized my childhood and presented me with the invoice. You think I owe you? I said, testing the weight of the words. We are your blood, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face again. Right on cue. You owe us everything. You wouldn't exist without us. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I searched for the fear I used to feel. The desperate need for their approval that had kept me silent for so long. But I felt nothing. No fear. No longing. Just the cold calculation of a chef checking a ticket time. Realizing an order is wrong. And preparing to send it back. Enjoy the sandwich, I said. I have to check on something in the office. I turned and walked out, leaving them with the bread and the mustard and their own suffocating entitlement. I didn't tell them I was getting a checkbook. I didn't tell them I was calling the police. I just walked away. Because for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the keys to the door. I stepped into my office and closed the door, sealing out the noise of the kitchen. The silence here was different. It was the silence of data, of facts, of balance sheets that don't lie. I sat at my desk and unlocked my tablet. I hadn't just walked away to cool off. 10 minutes ago, when I saw them on the security camera, I had sent a text to my lawyer and a private investigator I keep on retainer for employee background checks. I gave them one simple instruction: run a full financial and legal history on Christopher and Sarah Vance. Specifically, look for any activity around the year 2009. I needed to know. The math of their debt didn't add up. $450,000 was a specific, large number for a failing hardware store in a small town. It smelled like something else. The email notification pinged on my screen. Subject: Vance inquiry, urgent. I opened the file. It wasn't just a credit report. It was a timeline of betrayal. The first document was a death certificate, dated 1 year after I was abandoned. Eleanor Vance. Status: presumed deceased. Cause: exposure, runaway. He had declared me dead. He didn't look for me. He didn't file a missing persons report to find me. He filed it to build a case for a payout. He erased me legally so he could profit financially. The second document was an insurance claim. Beneficiary: Christopher Vance. Payout: $100,000. My grandfather. The only person who had ever shown me kindness before he died when I was 10. Had left a small life insurance policy in my name. It was meant for my education. For my future. Christopher couldn't access it while I was alive. So he killed me on paper. He monetized my death. The third document was a series of bank transfers. The insurance money, my blood money, had been transferred almost immediately to a business account. Joshua Vance Enterprises. They didn't just abandon me. They sold me. They used the money from my death to fund Joshua's failed startups. The $450,000 they owed now? It wasn't medical bills. It was gambling debts and failed crypto investments Joshua had racked up. Thinking the well would never run dry, I stared at the screen. This wasn't just bad parenting. This was criminal fraud. I thought about the illusion of power in an empty wallet. My father walked in here like a king, demanding tribute, believing his blood gave him authority. But that's the narcissist's delusion. They think people are assets. They think relationships are transactions where they set the price. He thought he owned my value. Even after he'd thrown me away. He thought he could kill the asset and still collect the dividends. He believed that his title of father was a credit limit that could never be maxed out. But ghosts don't pay debts. And I was about to show him exactly what haunting looks like. I printed the documents. The printer whirred, spitting out the evidence of my murder. I picked up a silver serving tray, usually reserved for presenting the check. I placed the papers on it, folded neatly like a bill. I walked back out to the kitchen. The noise of the service faded into the background. All I could hear was the rustle of the paper on the tray. It was time to clear the table. I wasn't just bringing the check. I was bringing the audit. And they were about to find out that they were overdrawn. I walked back into the glass room. They had finished the sandwich. Christopher was leaning back in his chair, picking his teeth with a casual arrogance that made my skin crawl. He looked at me with expectation, his eyes darting to my hands, looking for a checkbook or a bank transfer confirmation. "Well?" he said, not bothering to sit up straight. "Did you transfer it? We can give you the routing number if you need it." I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table, blocking the door. I placed the silver tray in the center of the table, right over the crumbs of the bologna sandwich. "I have your bill," I said. Christopher smirked, exchanging a look with Joshua. "Very funny. L. Just give us the money so we can get out of this fancy trap and back to our lives." He reached for the leather folder on the tray. He flipped it open, expecting a check with 6 zeros. His smile froze. It didn't fade gradually. It just stopped working. Like a glitching screen. He wasn't looking at a check. He was looking at a receipt. A faded digital scan of a Greyhound bus ticket from 2009. Cheyenne to Chicago. Price, $155. Item 1. I said, my voice projecting. I wasn't whispering anymore. I wanted the sound to carry through the glass. To the staff. To the dining room beyond. Transportation costs, $155. Inflation adjusted. Christopher looked up, confusion warring with anger. "What is this? Is this a joke?" "Keep reading," I said. "Turn the page." He flipped the page. The death certificate. Eleanor Vance. Deceased. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes darting between the paper and my living, breathing face. Joshua grabbed the paper, reading it, his eyes widening as the reality of what I knew hit him. Item 2. I continued, my voice ice cold. Life insurance fraud. $100,000. Plus interest. Plus 15 years of compounding guilt. You found this?" Christopher stammered, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "We thought you were dead. We had to move on. We needed the money to survive. You didn't think I was dead," I said. "You hoped I was dead, because I was worth more to you as a corpse than as a daughter." I leaned in, placing my hands on the table, looming over them. "You didn't survive on that money. You funded his failures." I pointed a finger at Joshua. "You spent my life on his gambling debts and his crypto schemes. You spent me. I am gone. I have been liquidated. You can't spend the same dollar twice." "Christopher." "Eleanor. Please." Sarah sobbed, reaching for me, her composure shattering. "We were desperate. We love you." "You don't love me," I said. "You love the insurance policy. And now you're here because you spent it all and you need a refill. But the bank is closed." I stood up straight and turned to address the room. The diners nearest the glass had stopped eating. My sous chef was watching. The servers were watching. "You didn't come here for a daughter," I said, loud enough for the back tables to hear. "You came for a ghost. And ghosts don't pay debts." I pointed to the door. "Get out." Christopher stood up, his face red, the veins in his neck bulging. For a second, I saw the man who used to terrify me in the hardware store. He looked like he was going to lunge. He opened his mouth to scream, to assert his dominance one last time, but then he looked around. He saw the diners staring. Phones out. He saw my sous chef standing by the door with a cleaver, casually cleaning it with a towel. He saw the security guard stepping forward from the shadows. He realized, finally, that he was small. He wasn't the king of the hardware store anymore. He was just a fraud in a cheap coat, standing in my empire. The security guard didn't even have to touch him. He just held the door open, a silent invitation to leave my world. Christopher looked at the open door, then back at me. He opened his mouth, perhaps to curse me, perhaps to beg. but the words died in his throat. He realized he had no currency left. He was logically, morally, and financially insolvent. He walked out. His shoulders slumped, looking 20 years older than he had when he walked in. Joshua followed, eyes fixed on the floor. The golden child finally tarnished beyond repair. Sarah paused at the threshold, looking back with a face crumpled by a tragedy she had helped right. She waited for me to call her back. She waited for the daughter she trained to be a fixer to fix this. I just watched her. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the way I feel when I trim the fat off a prime rib. It's necessary. It's precise. And once it's in the bin, I don't think about it again. She turned and left. The heavy glass door swung shut with a solid, final thud. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. My entire staff was staring at me. My sous chef still held the towel. The dishwasher had stopped the spray hose. They were waiting to see if I would crumble. They were waiting to see if the ghost would haunt me. Zzz, zzz. The thermal printer on the pass stuttered to life, spitting out a fresh ticket. The sound was small, mechanical, and beautiful. It cut through the tension like a knife. I ripped the ticket off the machine. I read it. Order in. I called out, my voice steady and loud. Table 4. Tasting menu. Fire first course. Yes. Chef! The brigade roared back in unison. The kitchen exploded back into motion. Pans sizzled. Knives chopped. The rhythm returned. Life moved on. It moved on instantly. Without hesitation. Because I had built a machine that ran on excellence. Not trauma. Hours later, the service was over. The last guest had gone home. The kitchen was scrubbed down, the stainless steel gleaming under the night lights. The staff had clocked out. I sat alone at the chef's table. The glass door was open now. I wasn't eating bologna. I was eating a bowl of risotto. Warm and rich and perfect. I looked out at my empty restaurant. It was quiet. But it wasn't the cold silence of the Wyoming snow. It was a warm silence. It was the silence of safety. I know there is someone reading this right now who is still standing in the snow. I know you're there. You're holding on to a relationship that hurts you because you think it's your duty. You think that if you just explain yourself one more time, if you just give a little more money, or a little more time, or a little more of your soul, they will finally see you. You think that leaving makes you the bad guy? I am writing this letter to you. The outsider. The one who feels like a guest in their own family. The one who pays the bills but never gets the credit. I need you to know that walking away isn't failure. It is the bravest thing you will ever do. You are not a branch that has fallen off the tree. You are a seed that the wind carried away so you could grow in soil that doesn't poison you. They will call you selfish. They will call you cold. They will tell you that you owe them. Let them talk. You cannot pay a debt that doesn't exist. You cannot buy love from people who only know how to sell you. It is okay to cut the line. It is okay to be the villain in their story if it means you get to be the hero in yours. You are allowed to build a home where the heat works, where the food is yours, and where nobody can ever lock you out in the cold again. I took the last bite of my risotto. It tasted like freedom. I stood up, turned off the lights, and locked the door to my empire. I wasn't going back to the hardware store. I was going home.